Dr. Nadine Burke Harris.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Nadine Burke Harris, and I'm a pediatrician and the founder and CEO of the Center for Youth Wellness, a health organization created to advance the research and clinical care of toxic stress in children. You don't have to be a doctor to recognize that a child being forcibly separated from their parents' care faces long-term psychological and emotional harm. But we now know this type of trauma, left unaddressed, can more than double an individual's risk for asthma, autoimmune disease, chronic lung disease, and cancer, and can cut their life expectancy short by decades. Research from the CDC, Kaiser Permanente, and many others demonstrates that adverse childhood experiences, like being forcibly separated from a parent or caregiver, substantially increases the risk for negative physical and psychological outcomes, both in the short term and later in life. Here's why. When any one of us experiences something scary or threatening, our brains and bodies activate our stress response system that leads to the production of high levels of stress hormones, including adrenaline and cortisol, and is responsible for many of the feelings that we associate with being terrified. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, is activated, and the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functioning, including judgment and impulse control, is inhibited. Stress hormones stimulate our hearts to beat stronger and faster, raise our blood pressure and blood sugar, and activate our immune system, among many other effects. The stress response is a normal and, in fact, essential part of our biological processes and allow us to respond and adapt to challenging circumstances. However, children facing severe stress require the nurturing care of a trusted adult to shut off the stress response and restore normal functioning. Without this nurturing buffer, the biological stress response becomes overactive. Children are uniquely vulnerable to the effects of an overactive stress response because their brains and bodies are just developing. High levels of adversity without the buffering protection of a trusted caregiver leads to changes in brain structure and function, weakening of the immune system, impairment of hormonal levels, and these changes are what is now recognized by the American Academy of Pediatrics as the toxic stress response. Toxic stress can literally change the way a child's DNA is read and transcribed, leading to long-term health effects. A nurturing caregiver is critical for interrupting this biological process. Nurturant caregiving regulates levels of cortisol and adrenaline and other stress hormones, and releases healthy hormones, including oxytocin, that protect a child's developing brain and cardiovascular system. As parents, when our children face something scary, such as a scary experience or injury, we instinctively hold them close. That loving hug releases the hormone oxytocin, which inhibits the stress response and helps to deactivate this biological process. Many of the children coming to our borders have already been traumatized, health crisis in the making. In my clinic in San Francisco, I see the effects of toxic stress every day. The physical and emotional risks to these children are real. In infants and young children, it can manifest as failure to thrive, sleep disturbance, and developmental delay, as well as increased risk for viral infection, bacterial infection such as pneumonia, and other illnesses. In school-age children and adolescents, we see increased inflammation, hypersensitivity such as allergies, eczema, and asthma, autoimmune disease, obesity, pubertal changes, as well as disorders of mood, behavior, and learning. At the Center for Youth Wellness, we've been pioneering multidisciplinary treatments for toxic stress. And while there's still much work to be done, the evidence demonstrates promising interventions to help regulate and overactive stress response and improve outcomes for kids. Step 1 is minimizing the dose of adversity to which children are exposed. And step 2 is enhancing the buffering capacity of their trusted caregivers to help them regulate their stress response. The executive order to end the damaging practice of unnecessarily removing vulnerable children from the buffering protection of their trusted caregivers was an important first step. However, we have an obligation to address the harms that are currently facing the children who have already been subject to this policy. Without intervention, they are at high risk for both short and long-term health consequences. Thank you for this opportunity to share the science of toxic stress, and I ask that you use this science to inform your actions on behalf of the American people.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I think laying out the toxic stress and the underlying chemistry behind it and how that's related to what these children are facing is very helpful. Thank you.